Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of A Place on Ministries. I'm your host, Pastor Jeff. We've taken a little break due to the fact that I was dealing with parenthood, but we are back now, and we got a bunch of episodes, and we're going to kick it off with this very first episode that I'm super excited about. I'm going to address kind of the elephant in the room here, and even though I'm a male, we're going to focus on the females in this episode here. This episode is all about the struggle of the single female Christian. This is something that's very dear and near to my heart, but we have a wonderful person on the show today, a dear and near friend of mine, Ravimbo. Say hello. It's great to have you here on the show
guys.
today.
Thank you, Pastor Jeff, for giving me this platform and opportunity to share my story and hopefully help somebody who's on a similar journey in life right now.
Amen. So so why are we having this type of topic on A Place for Everlong Ministries? The reason why we're doing this episode is because honestly, I find that one of the number one reasons why women are leaving the church to which they're currently in right now is because of this issue. To be honest with you, there's not a lot of guys out there as far as the church goes, or the options seem to be lacking, or the ratio of women to men within the church is a huge gap.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of women who are struggling with loneliness, struggling with fear, struggling with anxiety, wondering, if God is ever going to come through, or if they're just going to have to do this on their own. And so because of this, women are leaving the church. And, it's not necessarily that they're leaving the church that which is bothering me, and because obviously they're going to some other church, and, that it's great that they're continuing on with their faith and everything. But the whole point of this ministry is that we want you to be connected into the body of Christ where you are supposed to be connected. We want you to be in the will of God where He wants you to be. And we don't want people stepping outside of the will of God because of this, because when we start stepping outside of that will of God, then the struggles begin to add up more within our lives. And I do believe that God is calling each of us to be connected into the body in some way, some shape, some form. And by doing that, it's not bending to fear or anxiety, but I want to just dive into this episode right now. I want to dive into these questions. I just want to start off, Ravimbo, how bad is it right now for the single woman in the church?
Pastor Jeff, it's not looking good. It's not at all. If I was a doctor, I would say prognosis dismal.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll speak on our church, like the church we worship
Mm-hmm.
at, and I think maybe it might translate across other churches just in general in the body of Christ. But when you look at the demographics just in our church, I think it's almost an 80 to 20 kind of ratio. 80% women, 20% men. And when you look deeper and kind of try to unpack that 20%, you'll find that maybe a third of the men are married, so completely off the market. Some are in relationships, and then some are younger. Obviously, I'm of a certain age. I'm in my mid, venturing into late 20s now. For anyone who wants. And so it's obviously, looking at a certain age range that will match up to where I'm at in life. And so those people who might be the perfect fit just aren't ready or aren't displaying characteristics that are conducive to pursuing a healthy relationship that will end in marriage. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing from experience, observation, listening to other people and hearing their stories. There's not a lot of variety, if I could call it that, to choose from. And this isn't even without looking at, so obviously there's qualifiers that I need in my life, certain, and not even materialistic things, but just things that would be nice to have and ideal for where I'm at in life, my ambitions, where I'm trying to go. So that obviously narrows things down a whole lot more, because not everyone is going to have that.
No, for sure. For sure. And some people would look at the church and think, okay, so it's not, it doesn't necessarily look like it's, 80% to 20%. But yeah, when you do factor in the keep in mind, we're not talking necessarily about male to female. We're talking about single male to female,
Yeah.
right? And that's where you try to understand that like probably half the male population in your church is taken. But I mean, to be honest with you, it can be bleak. And I mean, best case scenario, the ratio is probably 2-1. But on average within a church, and nowadays, you're probably looking at least 10 to 15-1. And that right there alone, I mean, I feel like is scaring a lot of women out there. But do you think there's a lot of women out there, though, right now who maybe are struggling with this notion in their mind, but aren't necessarily speaking up about it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you should mention this because I was having a conversation just yesterday with a friend of mine where we were discussing just this very topic. And I think it's difficult to talk about it without seeming like you're kind of obsessed and obsessive about relationships and everything, because already women are painted in that light of want to be married, want to have the kids and the husband and everything. So it does make it difficult to broach the topic and to say, hey, like, honestly speaking, I'm struggling with the idea that I might end up alone because I don't see anyone in my church who is compatible with me, but also just in general, there's no one, even before we begin to assess compatibility, to even say, let me see if they're compatible. And yeah, I think it's definitely an issue that plagues, I think, the church body as a whole. Because even I'm from Zimbabwe, and obviously I go to church there as well. And I went to a girls and women's retreat in December, and this was a key topic that people were praying about and were asking to kind of be ministered unto about, because they want to get married. Women want to get married. We want to start families, but it's so difficult to say it without sounding like all you want is this life.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And the thing is that I think like in the church, it's not, women get a bad rap around it because they kind of feel like they talk about it more than guys do. But it's just, it is something guys talk about. But let's face it, I mean, as far as the guys go, it's not. We come to church and we see a sea of fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women come to
Exactly.
church, we're seeing empty ponds. So I mean, the conversation becomes a little more dire, right, than it would in let's say a guy's perspective. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to tap into scripture now, because I mean, God, I mean, when I was struggling, I personally went through this, and I went through about 11 years of being single in the church. And I'm not talking like 11 years, like 11, like starting off at 11, age 11 or upward or whatnot. Right? We're talking like my prime years. I think like my last girlfriend was when I was about 18 years old. I didn't meet my wife. Until I was about 29. So in between 18 years of age and 29 years old, I was really, really struggling with singleness. Now, obviously, it wasn't that big of an issue in the beginning, but as you start to get older and you're in your late 20s, right?
Yeah.
Panic and fear starts to kick in. You wonder if it's ever going to happen. And I mean, at that point, I had already, it's not like I was just idly sitting by. I was trying, I was making an effort, trying to get out there, trying to put myself out there. A couple of times I believed it was of God, and unfortunately it wasn't, because it was really just, whether it be loneliness on my part kicking in, or me just trying to force the scenario, whatever it may be. It just didn't work out, and I mean, I even got to the point where my pastors kind of had to come up to me and say, like, look, we give you our blessing to go outside of the church to try to find a wife, because they knew my struggles that I was going through. I don't fit the demographic of the church. The church we go to, it's predominantly African. It's predominantly Ghanaian and Nigerian, to be exact. And so for me, there was a lot of struggles, there was a lot of issues, and whether the girls there just kind of never really pictured to marry a white guy, or their parents were just not all for it. There was a lot of struggles and a lot of obstacles I had to really overcome. And I really was at that place where I was just like, am I going to make it in this God? Am I going to make it in this church, or do I got to hightail and run out? And I personally very much felt like God was really calling me to this church, even though my situation looked pretty bleak. So he gave me a word, and it was all throughout the book of Ruth. So I just want to examine, we're just going to examine the book of Ruth here very quickly. Now, for those of you who don't know and are not too familiar with the book of Ruth, Ruth was a widow who decides to stick by her mother-in-law's side. Her mother-in-law's husband passed away. Her husband, Ruth's husband, ultimately passed away as well. And the options for Ruth in being able to find another husband at this point are very bleak. And so the book very much starts off in a scenario of Naomi, the mother-in-law, trying to tell her daughter-in-laws, both of them, to get up and go and to leave, go back to your home, and try to finish out your life there. But Ruth decides that she is not going to abandon her mother's side. And so we're going to pick up in verse 15, verse 15, which is right where Naomi is trying to get Ruth to go, but Ruth is not having any of it. And in chapter 1, verse 15, it says, "And she said, 'Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law.' But Ruth said, 'Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. And the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me.' When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her." So we'll stop there for a moment just to examine this. So Ruth was a widow. Okay, I just want people to understand the time in which we're reading these scriptures. All right, Ruth was a widow. Being a widow back then is not like being a widow today, right? You're a widow, whatever, right? Pick up, carry on, remarry. You're all good. In those times, to be a widow was a very sad thing to be. The reason behind this was because if you were a widow, the odds of you remarrying were very, very slim. There were a lot, especially within the Jewish law. There was a lot of things which hindered the widows to be able to move on freely. Mm-hmm. In other words, certain individuals within the family had more rights to the widow. So in other words, it was more custom that someone within the widow's former husband would marry her, whether it be a brother or a cousin or something. Yeah. So it wasn't like she could just kind of go out and marry whoever she wished. That wasn't how they did things back then. And a lot of the times, obviously, family, these guys were already married. They already had kids of their own. They weren't looking to necessarily add on to their family. So a lot of the time, the widows would not actually remarry. Mm-hmm. They would actually live out their days continuing to be alone. On top of that, she was no longer a virgin. Now, once again, in today's day and age, not a big deal. Back then, it was a huge deal, mm-hmm. right? These guys wanted to marry virgins. And on top of that, Ruth was a foreigner. She was from Moab. She was a Moabite, which made things a little bit more complicated because even though, we might be able to overlook the fact that you are from a foreign country, at least you're a virgin, at least you're exotic, at least you're this, you're that. But when you begin to add all of these three things come together, things are looking very bleak for Ruth. And this is why Naomi, her mother-in-law, is sending her away. She's like, look, at least you could possibly try to live out the rest of your life with your family. They could look after you. They could take care of you. Yeah, you may never remarry, but at least you'll be able to live on with your life. If you stay with me, her mother-in-law, Naomi, things aren't going to look good. And in keep in mind, in a time in which there was a famine going on in the land as well. So what I want to know is, do you feel, or have you ever felt like something now or change something now, I'm never going to find a husband? Because this is like, I mean, Ruth was in a scenario where it's just like, look, things aren't good economy wise, things aren't looking bleak, or things are looking bleak, they're not looking good. Something's got to give, something's got to change. Do you personally, have you ever felt like in that scenario where like, I got to do something, I got to do it now?
Yeah,
Especially
absolutely.
because I had this whole grand life plan on, you plan everything out so perfectly when you're 17 years old and you think, I'm going to finish school, I'm going to be 23, and then by 24, I should be engaged, 25, I should be married with a kid on the way. Very much that linear trajectory that I don't know if it actually ever works for anyone, but it seems like all of us have this notion that that's what we want our lives to be. And so, yeah, I absolutely had this idea of everything is going to fall into place perfectly. I'll meet the love of my life at like 22, 23, and then by 25 maximum, we should be expecting our first child. Maximum. Maximum. Yeah, that was it. And so I think when things started to, so I've been in other relationships, obviously, and not necessarily people in the church, like our church. But when all of those didn't work out, and I'm at the cusp of 23 going on to 24, and I'm exiting a relationship, it was pretty much like, oh my gosh. So for me to be able to achieve that life goal that I want and maybe amend it by 6 months or so, I need to do something stat. And I found myself saying, you know what, somebody at church is interested in me. Great. It's got to be of God, right? Because why wouldn't it be? Why would it not work out? And then just jump on it and kind of got myself into thinking, you know what, goes to church, everything is good, this is it, God's got to bless it and it's going to be fine, and then just moving with it and going along with it. And partly because I wanted to have a certain life at a certain age and milestones that I want to hit that I've put on myself, and just by all means necessary, right? It doesn't matter what my previous requirements may have been or what I feel like I had wanted in a husband before. A guy is interested in me. This is great. Let's go. And that was kind of the approach that I took and found myself in.
I mean, if you really think about it, right? Like, I mean, Ruth could have left. She could have ultimately just up and gone. The odds would have been in her favor, especially when it comes to living or whatnot. So I mean, you have to, like, I mean, I can only imagine she was like, she had this obviously this faithfulness to Naomi, but you have to think there was some kind of fear, there was some kind of loneliness that was creeping into Ruth's life. So I mean, how one have you been feeling that loneliness? Have you been feeling that fear, and what kind of toll has been taking on you as a Christian?
Yeah, so I have been feeling I guess I had been, I'll rephrase that, more past tense because I've had a change in mindset, which I'm sure we'll go a little bit into. But yeah, it's that loneliness is real. It's valid. I think especially after having listened to your story as well, and I've heard it a couple of times as well, and I can I can understand. At first, when I first heard it, I was pretty young. I want to say it was about 4 years ago when I heard you speak and you were speaking on it. I was like, oh, okay, well, oh, hoo, whatever. But now the more I go up there and things are changing in my life, it's become, now I'm starting to understand the trajectory of your story and why you share your story and the way you do. Because absolutely, I've been feeling like, oh, it would be nice to be able to come home and have somebody who is, encouraging me, or just there for me, especially a person, I'm not from here at all, so I have no family members, like actual blood family members in this country, and I've been looking forward to the time where I can have a family of my own and not feel so isolated. This is not an insult to my friends or even my church family who are great, but there's a sense of loneliness that comes with not having, that connection and that tie to people that you can say, this is my family. So yeah, there are times where I'll see people on Instagram, engagements, weddings, invitations and everything, and I'm happy for them. I genuinely am, but it can't help but wonder, so when is that going to be me? When do I get to share and have that moment of happiness where I can truthfully, say I'm now starting my own family. There's somebody I can depend on 24/7 who has pledged to be there for me, and not just my friend who might have some other commitment come up and they have to abandon maybe me to tend to their own commitments. So yeah, it's a very lonely, and sometimes if you don't check those emotions, it can actually be a bit consuming. Like it could become something that you start to think about on a constant, almost unhealthy basis of like, why not me? Why won't anyone look at me? Why won't anyone approach me? And it can take a toll.
I mean, you go to a wedding and you're not even staring at the bride necessarily. You're just envisioning that it's you walking down the aisle.
Yeah.
Like people. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny. I didn't realize that I was preaching to a fearless Rimbimbo like 4 years ago.
I was like, oh no, that
whatever.
Me?
Whatever.
No.
This guy's talking crazy. No, but I mean, yeah, like, and I mean, obviously, most women don't really want to talk to me as far as this stuff goes, because I mean, let's face it, a lot of women don't want to portray themselves as crazy. They don't want to portray themselves as lonely.
Yeah.
A lot of them are in a way, they want to show the world that they are strong and that they can be able to withstand anything that life throws at them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the time that we're living in, it's life is all about status and how we project ourselves and how people perceive us to be. And so I can only imagine that, like, there are a lot of women out there who are feeling that fear, and feeling that loneliness. That and like you said, it can be consuming. I mean, for me, honestly, the loneliness was crippling. I personally was at a point where I was actually going through, like, the loneliness was kicking in so much that I was actually even going through a depression.
Yeah.
And it was extremely difficult. It was extremely hard. And I mean, it's one thing, I think, if you're going to a church where you got a lot of friends and you got a lot of family, but when you go to a church where you have no family that shows up with you, you have very few friends, and then on top of that, it looks like you might die alone in this church. Like, I mean, it becomes terrifying. It becomes scary, but at the same time, it becomes obsessive.
Yeah.
Like, it's just your prayer life is, God, end this now. Like, please bring that better half into my life. Please end this pain and the suffering. God, time is counting down here. I mean, now granted, I mean, you're not as different as I am, but your culture is still different. You're from a different country than the majority of the demographic within our church. And has that played a factor? Have you noticed that playing a factor? Do you feel like some guys are just not interested in you because of it, or maybe some of them have written you off on your list, or maybe it's difficult for you to get into those inner circles because you just don't fit into that norm?
Yeah, I think the last point you mentioned might be more so what it is, not being able to fit into those circles, because a lot of our fellow church mates have grown up together. They know each other, their families know each other, super intertwined. It's very tight knit. So now to come, especially by myself, it's not like I even have my mom to be with me to kind of, forge relationships with the other moms and the other parents for them to then know, okay, this is the kind of family I come from. I'm just me by myself, kind of representing myself. So while it might not be an issue for the guys, just me being of a different culture, I do know that they're going to go home and then and this might be an anomaly. I don't know how far it's applicable, but I do know that a lot of the majority members of our church's culture, so Nigerian and Ghanaian, really do value people marrying, not even just within the national kind of like Ghanaian and Nigerian, but even down to the tribe. So down to like, you know, if you're Ashanti, marry someone who's Ashanti. If you're Igbo, marry someone Igbo, that kind of thing. So it goes even beyond just if I was Ghanaian or if I was Nigerian, but not from the same tribe as the person who I may have been interested in, it already presents as a challenge. So now someone from a different country altogether, I don't speak the language. While we might have some base things that are similar, there's obviously some things that I won't be able to relate to, not right away anyway, because of those differences. And I think it does play a role. They might be interested in me, but you'll go home and your mom will say, that girl, does she know what we do in our country? Does she know what we do in our village? You know, I was hoping we would have some kids of this tribe and my grandkids would be this way, and I don't know her family, her mom, they could be crazy, and all of these things, which I understand because in my country these are similar things, similar conversations that occur. So I know the root of it all, but it makes it challenging when now I'm uprooted from that culture where I'm from, where I could have found a Zimbabwean man to marry. I'm now in this church where there are no Zimbabwean guys for me to form those connections with. So I think that does definitely play a role, just not knowing people, not having those relationships, not having anything that can vouch that I could be Zimbabwean, your son could be Ghanaian or Nigerian, and it's like I'll respect their culture, they'll respect mine, and it's okay that we can raise our kids in a multicultural household and no one will die. But it's really it's difficult to convince parents of that, because I think my parents, my mom has only now come around to the fact that I'm probably not going to marry a Zimbabwean guy, just statistically. Even if I wanted to, even if I wanted to, like where is that happening? And so I've had to kind of coach her into, you know what, mom, if I marry someone who's not Zimbabwean, you have got to be okay with it, because that's just the reality of what it is. But she was also kind of leaning more towards the, oh, like if you could marry someone Southern African, even that would be great. But yeah.
So I get where it stems from, but it's not great.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I completely understand that, because I have my friend circle has always been very multicultural, and so I've had to witness horror stories where the parents just refused to speak to the individual, refused to acknowledge them, you know, wanted nothing to do with this relationship, believing it wasn't of God, believing that this wasn't right, this is not correct, it's not how things are done. I mean, obviously that's the worst case scenario, but I mean, I've even had to like sit in meetings and hear about how, you know, their Nigerian son is in no way going to marry their Ghanaian daughter. And I mean, you can only imagine, like, I'm thinking, oh God, you know, like, wait until they get a load of me, right? Like, wait until I step into the picture. And you know, and at the time, I mean, like, I mean, granted, I got my whole Rona hairstyle and beard going on right now, but I mean, back then I had like earrings, I had really long hair. I mean, I wasn't just like a white guy. I mean, I looked like a rock type of white guy who, I mean, I'm pretty sure I scared most of the parents than anything else. And I mean, when I had to tell my mom, I mean, or, you know, that I ultimately married a Jamaican woman, and you know, I to be honest with you, I was actually a little nervous to tell my parents, you know, like, hey, she's from Jamaica, AKA she's not white, right? And I know my parents aren't racist, but at the same time, right, I feel like parents have this picture in their head of who their children are going to marry, right? And you don't want to disappoint them either, but it just happened to work out that, I mean, I was single for so long that my parents, honestly, at this point, I think they were just more or less happy that I brought home a woman. You know, I didn't bring home like a dog or you know, something else, right? Like I think they were just absolutely happy that I just brought home a woman in that point of view. But um, it's, you know, being outside of that culture definitely has an obstacle. And I mean, if the odds already weren't stacked against you just being a female in today's day and age, right? You also have to deal with that. But I mean, for me, it was definitely looking bleak. And I looked at this like there was two options before me that I kind of felt like I was just praying to God every night, and I was just like, God, two scenarios are going to happen here. Okay, Father, it's either I'm going to decide to go out to another church and look for a wife, and I was afraid to do that mainly because I felt like I was eventually going to find a church where I felt like it was more home, like it was more comfortable, a church that I can kind of blend into a little bit more, hide a little bit more, not stick out like a sore thumb. Um, I was worried about that. I was worried that I was going to choose comfort over purpose. And or the other option was I was just going to leave the church altogether. I was just done, right? Like I'm just going to bounce. I'm just going to go to some other church. I'm done with this, right? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm sick of being alone. And so my question to you is, I mean, have you ever thought about maybe the only solution that is before you is to leave the church that which you're currently
in? So I haven't necessarily thought of leaving. Well, not really for this particular reason. Like
okay, we
not
got other reasons.
finding. There are other reasons connected to this, but not necessarily not finding anyone. But I have considered the option of staying in my church and serving and doing what I need to do there, but also opening myself up to other ministries and connecting with other Christian, I guess, men and people just in at church events or Christian events, and maybe seeing if that would be somewhere that I could find better chances, maximize my chances. And so, I mean, I haven't had the chance to try this or to trial and error it just on account of COVID. So there haven't been many events or any that I can say that I've tried. But that has been something that I've thought of saying, I don't want to forfeit my destiny and my purpose in the church where I'm planted. But I also look around and no disrespect to the men in our church, but I don't see myself with anyone who's there right now.
Guys, you're on blast. Take notice. Take notice.
And I mean, I love my fellow brothers in Christ, but you know, just looking around and thinking, do I see myself with any one of these people? And what does that look like? And how does my life look like with some of these guys? And I'm not seeing it, at least not right away, and that may be a consequence of something not being revealed to me right now. That might become apparent later, which if so, thank God for that. Or if it's simply just the person maybe hasn't come to our church yet, because that's not something that's improbable. A lot can happen in even a weekend where somebody could come into the church, we connect, and that's that. So I'm not limiting God on account of, no, I have to leave the church and I have to go elsewhere. Anything can happen. But when I look at it right now, this very minute, and think about the guys in our church, I don't see it.
Thing though, I mean, like when you step outside of the church that which you were in, and you venture into the unknown, right? Are you multiplying your odds of finding a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Absolutely.
and does that scare you more?
That's a very good question. So, even apart from, I know the reason, I understand the basis and the principle as to why our leaders want us to kind of, keep it in our church, local church body. just because we're receiving the same doctrine, we are being trained under the same principles and values, etc. So when I, raising leaders, that's kind of the mission statement of our church, and I would want somebody who I'm, tying my destiny to be aligned with the same values that I am being taught and that I'm following at my local church. But then to your question of am I maximizing my odds of meeting someone in wolf in sheep's clothing, I can tell you for a fact that can happen even in our local church.
This is true. This is 100% true. It's 100. You are very, very correct. So now here's the issue, right? The dangers of not just being outside, but being outside God's will. Now this is where it kicks in, right? Because a lot of I know that there are a lot of churches out there that very much, because so many women are leaving the church, right? And let's face it, right now the most faithful people that seem to be serving in the church are not necessarily men but women.
Yeah.
And they produce like such a large amount of what a church is being run by. Like when you see people cleaning the church, when you see people taking care of the church, when you see people running the ministries and organizing things and taking notes and everything else, right? A large population of the workforce of what makes a church run in North America is the women. It's the women who are doing it. And so you have all these pastors who don't want these women to leave. You want them to stay because I mean, at the end of the day, like that's where they're getting all this help from. So they're more inclined to say, please don't leave. Please, trust God, have faith in God. God will bring a man to this church for you, and so on. And I don't necessarily 100% agree with that. And the reason behind this is, and I mean, this might seem contradictory on my end, but we'll look at a quick scripture here in Ruth chapter 2, verse 8. It says, then Boaz. Now Ruth ultimately went into, she decided to go into a field. And she was directed to go into Boaz's field because Boaz was someone who the family knew, and to help glean from the field. In other words, to pick whatever wheat that might have been dropped or left over in order for her and her mother-in-law to have some food to eat. And so now you have Ruth in the field, and Boaz takes notice of her. So then Boaz said to Ruth, you will listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. So what I really, really want to like focus on in this is that it's not necessarily like, I don't want women to think that they can't leave the church. They can't venture outside the church to go meet someone. No. Yeah. By all means, you can. The point, though, is to continue to walk in God's will, right? That's the main key. So, I mean, now here's the thing, right? There's no guarantee that Ruth finds food in the field. She might end on a little, and even though Boaz told her, like, look, don't venture out, don't leave my property, there'd be a scenario where, let's say, Ruth doesn't have a lot of food, her and her mother-in-law are starving, and she needs to do something drastic. Now, me personally, okay, I personally have had loneliness kick in to the point where I was just done. I was just done. I threw caution to the wind, and I said, you know what, God, I'm done with this. I'm done trying to play it safe and whatnot. So, like, have you personally, like, have you ever gotten to that place where you just kind of maybe threw caution to the wind a little, threw yourself there a little?
I guess I kind of did. And by put myself out there, I guess I have I don't want to say antiquated views of of how I do want to be pursued, as opposed to be the one that's, sliding in the DMs like the youth do these days. But absolutely. I am very much like open to somebody who is not from my church, or just anyone, not anyone, like I don't have standards, but just a respectable gentleman, If they expressed interest in me, I'm okay with exploring where that could go. So I guess in that way I threw caution to the wind, because I think there was a point in time in my journey where I was like, he has to be from this church. It's gotta be one of these people. It's gotta be God. It has to be. And I was rigid in trying to make it fit into that. And then after a while I said, you know what, it's okay. And especially when I went through an experience that made me think, oh my gosh, maybe it's for the best if I throw caution to the wind and explore other options, because this clearly did not work out for me at all. If anything, it scarred me to the point where I want to look elsewhere. So yeah, I think so. And now I think I'm still in that place where I've thrown caution to the wind, and I'm open to exploring what a respectable gentleman who approaches me has to offer.
Respectable gentleman.
I emphasis on respectable. But
oh my goodness.
Sometimes we can rush into relationships, and I personally, there are times where I felt like I rushed into stuff. I kind of rushed in, and looking back, I think I didn't take time to pray about it more, or to really kind of examine the situation more.
Yeah.
Have you gone through any scenarios where, like, let's say, like, you went into a relationship, and obviously in hindsight it didn't go well, it didn't go properly, and I mean, were there signs, I guess, in the sense that, like, maybe this wasn't it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I probably can say this for all of my relationships. But the first, it's only three, guys. You can relax. I'm not crazy. But the first two, I guess I can rule those out and say, these people they were Christian on paper, on account of, you're born in an African household, and so by default you go to church with mom, because that's just what we do. And I think that the third one is probably the most significant, because it had the appearance of godliness, but not actually. When I was then, now in hindsight, especially as well, because hindsight is definitely 2020. But I think because I had been through those first experiences with guys that really weren't in the church, and I was okay with just doing like the casual, like, okay, cool, let's just do this and see what happens. I definitely wanted to be a lot more intentional going forward. And so here it was, a Christian guy, model Christian guy, and everything seems to line up, right? Which is what I wanted. Somebody in the church, someone who's serving, somebody who is just out there. And so I don't think I prayed about it, because I did pray, but not as much as now I see I should have, and really analyzed the issue and the relationship and what the intention was before going for it. But I took it as, okay, this person is Christian, fully Christian, which is more than I can say for previous people. Obviously this has got to be of God, right? Like, everything on paper looks great, so let's just go 100% into it. So I had my whole life planned out with this person. I think like 3 months in, I was ready to be like, you know what, if you are trying to get married in the next year, I'm definitely 100% down to do this. But
3 months.
By in the 3 months in, I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is great. This is perfect. You fit all the criteria. You're a good, upstanding person. Perfect.
You're scaring all the millennials right now, 3 months.
I know. It is scary. It is. But I'm mid-20s. I'm trying to have, plan everything, have a kid by 26 at most, and all of the other good stuff. So I was really like, let's go. Let's keep it moving. Why do we need to think about this more if it's clearly, like, if it's right, it's right. And so because I put myself in that mindset and in that position early on, like 3 months is very soon to be in that headspace. I really was ignoring, I think, things that should have been red flags, or things that should have poked and piqued my attention to dive deeper into them and to explore them further. I just didn't believe that it was possible for anything to be worse than things that I'd already experienced. because it was like, you know what, you're a Christian guy, we're in the church, we pray in tongues, the whole nine. Nothing can be as bad as experiences that I've gone through in the past with people who weren't at that stage in their lives. So I was willing, and it's honestly, I'm a bit, I don't know if embarrassed or ashamed is the way to say it, because I am usually like very attentive, and I know what I want, and I know that I won't compromise on certain things, but I took appearances at face value, and I just kind of went with it. And I pegged everything on, well, you're a Christian, you're a child of God, you're great, so anything else is ultimately covered and will be overshadowed by that classification, that characteristic. Yeah, and it ended up not working out great for me, obviously, because now here I am. And if anything, I think I was more scarred than my previous relationships, and those weren't great either. I went through some really traumatic things with that as well, but I think what's worse about it, when you kind of rush and you don't look at things objectively, and it's with somebody in the church, it hurts more because you didn't expect that from, like, you can expect like a regular riffraff person to do that to you because, okay, after all, I knew what I signed up for, I knew this is the person you were, so this isn't a shock or a surprise. But somebody who is you know, a child of God, it can have a different impact on you. And so that's where I ended up anyway, having not really picked apart those red flags or listened to what the discernment of the Spirit, because I believe it was there. And in hindsight, I was able to see, oh no, this was not aligning, and this was, I should have paid attention there. There was this red flag there, but I was just like, you know, no, the Christian trumps everything. Everything is going to be fine.
Do you feel like you forced it? Do you feel like you forced the relationship a little?
I think I did. And it wasn't evident at that time because, and I don't know if I can speak for all women when I say this, but we have this innate, like, you know, the nurturing part, the part that wants to see things succeed, the part that wants to be happy and to have this model relationship, that now I have a guy, I can mold things, I can finesse things or position things to ultimately have the relationship that I want. So for me, it was, okay, he's here now. It might not be perfect, but I can work with this. This is fine. And so, yeah, I definitely forced things that I could maybe have given it time and it may have worked out better for me, or honestly just said, you know what, it's okay that it's not working out, and let me just exit from this situation.
You feel like maybe the heart was guiding the relationship a lot more than Christ was.
Yeah, absolutely. That I can definitely say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, you know, that's obviously, like, I mean, there's a lot of women out there, and personally, I mean, I don't know, maybe you see it in the church as well. I do see it, where women, I guess in a way, they're trying to keep a relationship going that realistically it almost seems like there's no happy ending to it, or it just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it fits, or it doesn't seem like it's the will of God or whatnot. But obviously it's never good, and it's never happy when a relationship doesn't work out. How did the relationship, I guess, once it did end, how did that affect you as far as being in the church goes? Like, how did that affect you? Like, was there a period in time where you didn't want to come to church, or was there a period maybe where you thought, like, am I ever going to show my face in church again? Did it affect you being able to serve? Did it affect your relationship with Christ overall?
Yeah,
so all of the above, actually. I think it was very, very difficult for me to even be at the building, just because I associated everything that I had gone through and was going through, not just with, you know, church. I come there every Sunday. I also happened to be working there at the time as well. So the building itself became a site of, like, triggering. It was triggering for me. A lot of PTSD. And if I'm being completely honest with you, I'm still dealing with that right now. And so I still find it very difficult to come to church and to be just at the building. Forget being inside, having the people around and everything. Just being at the physical, just building in the parking lot, for me, triggers up a lot of really terrible memories and just brings me back almost to the place where I remember, oh, yeah, this is the place, this is the site of my pain. Difficult, but I had committed to not being one of the people, the statistics of people who leave the church on account of a broken relationship. Because, like you said earlier, that is usually the story of people. Countless women, and I guess men as well, have left the church on account of relationships that went sour, and in the process of maybe forfeited their destinies and things that they really could have accomplished being in that place. So for me, and it wasn't an easy thing for me to get to the point of realizing that I had to stay. I'm fortunate enough to have had my best friend go through this entire journey with me and keep motivating me and keep uplifting me and telling me that we are not going to leave this church. I'm not going to see you exit this church on account of what a person did to you. Because I'm serving, I've been blessed enough to be able to serve in ministry now, to do really amazing things that have not only helped me in my spiritual life, but even in my personal life. Just elevated me. And I credit that to the opportunities that I've been given at the church. So it seems to me to be it's too much of a risk to my destiny and my purpose for me to leave because of what one person did to me. And I don't believe that a person can have that power over me to have me leave a place that I am supposed to thrive in. And so while those thoughts did cross my mind and I thought about it, I was not going to give the enemy the satisfaction of leaving. I was not going to give people the satisfaction of having me left. I don't know if there were people that would have wanted me to see me leave or to see me not there anymore for whatever reasons, but I wasn't going to give into any of that and be somebody who, like a footnote in the story of our church's history. And just, oh, she used to be here and then she left because things didn't work out with the relationship. No, exactly. That's too fickle of a reason for me to leave. So I powered through whatever PTSD and trauma that I have, remembering that ultimately my service is to God and not to any person or any pastor, any leader, anyone. It's to God, and He wants me there.
In the church and everything else. And I know that loneliness can really affect people. The fear of loneliness can really affect people. I'm not asking necessarily you specifically, but have you noticed, because I personally have noticed, but have you noticed that that there are scenarios where women are sacrificing holiness to continue to be in a relationship because singleness is by far worse?
Yeah, and if I promise to be open and transparent when we're preparing for this, and I will say that I that was me. That was definitely me as well, where it was like, you know what? Okay, here I am. I've got this. Keep it by all means necessary. God will understand. Or oops, just keep going back and repenting and go to the altar on Sunday and just repent, and then maybe go back and the cycle kind of perpetuates. Because hey, at the end of the day, I'm in a relationship, right? And that's I wasn't doing anything wild, but still things that are not within the will of God and how He'd want me and us to navigate and walk out our relationship stories. I wasn't doing that. I kind of ended up neglecting him and just saying, you know what, okay, thanks, I'm here now, I'll take it from here and do what I want. So I definitely have seen it. I've seen it countless times. I've been that person, and I know people who've been that person too.
In Ruth chapter 3 verse 2, it reads, "Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is not our relative. In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor." So this is, once again, this is Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, speaking to her, telling her, hey, look, now Boaz, whose young woman you were with, right? It never really clicked in, but there were other young women around Boaz. Boaz could have chosen any one of them. It didn't have to be Ruth. I mean, he was obviously in a place where he was looking for someone. He was in a place where he was open to have a wife,
Mm-hmm.
and and there were other women around, and there were probably other women who were probably on paper a better fit, right? As
Yeah.
far as the Jewish standard goes back then, right? Not married, virgin, not foreigners, and to be honest with you, some of them maybe even had some inheritance slapped onto the side, right? I mean, the inheritance that came with Ruth wasn't even really Ruth's; it was Naomi's,
Mm-hmm.
which made it even more worse, right? Because, I mean, it was just all these odds stacking against Ruth, and so there were other women, and just like there were other women around Boaz as there are guys, we get to the area of how do we how does a single woman in the church today, who's already dealing with fear, dealing with anxiety, struggling through her loneliness, looking at the fact that like there's hardly any guys in the church that which feel like they could be the possible one. How in the world now do you also go through the idea of combing through the options? I
Mm.
mean, do you personally feel like you have a lot of options, or I I, I mean, in our church right now, I mean, I mean, you're clearly not overwhelmed with the choices, right?
Oh no. Oh.
What do you mean? I'm spoiled for choice. No, but oh yeah, the combing through. I think where I'm at now, and this is a valid question, and for anyone who is in this position as well, like I can definitely understand and relate, and I'm with them. But I've realized, and I don't know if this was, I think it was a revelation that I had, that I don't have to compromise what I would want within obviously the limits of what God has planned for me, simply because it looks like there are no options. So I never want to find myself, I guess, doing what I had done before, being in a situation where I just jumped on it and said, okay, you're in the church, good, let's go. Because I do want to maintain the standards that I have for myself, and I hold myself in high regard, obviously not in a boastful way, but I think that I'm a good catch. I think I bring a lot to the table, and just because there aren't many guys in the church doesn't mean I should now lower my expectations on account of at least I snagged one. And have to now deal with the consequences of that and be like, oh well, I should have just waited. Because I don't know if it's God trying to redirect my thoughts, because I've been scrolling on Instagram lately and even Pinterest and things, and this quote keeps coming up of don't let the fear of being single right now make you regret having married the wrong person in 2-3 years or whatever. Because I ultimately think that regretting a situation when it sucks now, and honestly it sucks to be lonely. I want to be able to buy a house, and it would be great to have somebody to go halfsies with it, and to decorate and everything. But I think I'm okay with waiting until however long God has me wait, which I hope is not long, Lord. But rather that, and being in a happy, fruitful, productive, God ordained marriage, than having to cry myself to sleep every day.
Yeah.
Because I don't know where this person is, because I don't know now, people are knocking on my door with children that I don't know about, or so many scary scenarios of things that are happening out there in the world that I think I would rather avoid that. And I think that's one worse than 5 years, or just wallowing in my misery for the rest of my life because I didn't have the patience to wait for the person who really was supposed to propel me into my destiny.
Now, I mean, I've never actually really seen this. I've only heard about it, and I've heard it from multiple women. So I'm trying now that I like we're on this subject and whatnot, I can ask a woman outright and plain. Do you feel that when a single guy, and a single guy appears in church, and he, this ruggedly handsome, good-looking guy shows up, serving faithfully, praying, um, has all the check marks that most women have on their list and whatnot. is there almost like a competition going on? Like, do you feel like women kind of compete against one another? Is there like for example, like if you were to start dating someone, are you suddenly on like other women's hate lists when it comes to the church?
Church?
Honestly, I would love to say this isn't true, but I think it is. I I wish I could say it isn't true, but I honestly it's true. It's true. And it might not come across as like overtly this person doesn't like you, or there's it's not overt or anything. It's very subtle, like aggression, like microaggressions almost, where you can see that you're kind of stepping on some territory that is yeah, that's shaky. Because again, like, yeah, when somebody does come into the church, and obviously, like we've established, not many guys, and again, like, I guess handsomeness is objective. I could find somebody handsome that somebody else doesn't, but there are those people who are objectively handsome, who everyone can kind of agree, like, this is a good looking guy. And then, you start dating that person. I think people will definitely be looking like, why her, not me? What did she do that I didn't do? Or why didn't he notice me? And why didn't he approach me? And all these variables that kind of indirectly come out targeted towards the other woman. Because even though she didn't do anything and maybe just sat there and this guy approached her, it's almost like, what did you do? And like the insecurities of like, so you're better than me?
A lot of guys in the church who I feel are hunting for women. But at the same time, I feel like they're not really very serious about God. They're not really serious about church. They're not serious about really cultivating and developing a relationship with Christ. I always seen this, like I've seen it a couple of times where I've had female friends in the church, and I've kind of had to run blocker, so to speak, right, to keep these guys at bay. I've even had like one guy. I remember this one guy showing up to church with a fanny pack, and this was back when fanny packs were not cool. For whatever reason, fanny packs are back in style again. I don't know why.
They're cool again.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea why. But anyways, he showed up to church with like a fanny pack, and like right then and there, that fanny pack was a red flag for me. And he was all up on in my business trying to find out about a certain woman and individual, and is she single, and what is she like, and what is she this and what is she that. And I'm like, dude, this is like your first day showing up to this church. Who are you? Clearly you didn't come for the service. Clearly you didn't come for the message. You're probably just hunting around for women and whatnot. And the thing is that like there are so many guys out there who I feel like they're hunting on the weak-willed women. And women who could be taken advantage of. So do you feel like someone who is like doing everything she can to develop and cultivate a relationship with Jesus Christ, serving faithfully in the church, putting your career in priority with your life, and being a successful woman, do you feel like those factors actually hinder you in being able to meet someone? Like, do you feel like it's maybe intimidating some of the guys in church, scaring off some of these guys?
Yeah, so I think so, and the reason I say this is because people have told me I'm intimidating. I don't see it.
I've gotten that too. Don't worry about it. I've gotten that too.
I guess I can get it to a certain degree. I like what I like. I also happen to be kind of an extrovert, a little bit outspoken, and so I say things, and it's apparent that I like what I like. So maybe that might be it. But then again, another thing that I also think is, if you're intimidated by me, or if my success or where I'm going or my priorities in life are kind of a point of contention, or you don't feel like you can measure up, then you probably aren't the person to begin with. Have I had moments where I've doubted myself and thought maybe I should tone it down a little bit? We get fed this whole submission narrative, which submission itself isn't bad, but then there's this element, I feel, especially in more traditional churches and like where I grew up, where there's this emphasis on like, make your man feel like a man, and don't be too overshadowing or too overbearing or whatever. Don't be so outspoken. Basically, don't be me and everything I am. It can be a bit discouraging, because it's like, I want a Christian guy, but at the same time I mustn't be this person. So come off like, sweet, calm, and mild and meek and gentle and everything, but I'm not that person. And I find it difficult to be that person because that's not my personality type. And I've tried to a certain degree to be like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna listen to what you have to say. Let me give you a chance to be, to head this relationship and to give you that place. But they always fall short of that. Like they can never measure up.
Yeah. No, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I mean, like you said, you don't want to put yourself in a place where you're compromising yourself, right? Where you're lowering your standards. And at the same time, you want to be you. You want, I mean, you don't want to be this fake individual. You don't want to put on this mask, right? Because, I mean, these, I think we have to remember, like, these guys are, when they're pursuing women, they're treating it like an interview. They're gonna tell you what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to give you their best version of themselves. They're not going to come out and give you the correct version and whatnot. So the thing is that, like, in order for you to be able to attract the person which God has called you to, you got to be yourself. I mean, it's not, I mean, I was in a place where I just, like, I had to realize that, like, look, I don't fit the mold in this church at all. And I'm on top of that, I just, like, I think I'm like one morning and was just, looking at my closet and being like, I wonder what dashiki will I wear today for service. I had to be, I had to be myself. And being able to deal with these people. But the interesting part here, though, is being able to comb through the options and being able to be able to divide what's good and what's not good and everything else. If you look at Boaz here for a sec, now Naomi was saying that Boaz was out on the threshing floor. Now, Boaz had all these pickers to pick the wheat and everything else. But Boaz's position and what he did, because he was the head of the household, what he would do is when all the wheat came in, he would go to the threshing floor and begin to do his thing out on the threshing floor, which is winnowing. And what that is what he would do is he would separate the wheat from the chaff and from everything else that which was pretty much couldn't be used, or it was garbage. It had to be thrown away. And it's interesting that Boaz, being surrounded by all these women, being a man of position, a man of power, a man who had so much to offer, and being surrounded by all these women, was able to do the very thing that which his position called him to do. Which was to separate that which was not of let's say, that which was not good from that which was good, that which was not of God from that which was of God, right? And so if you look at it here, like, I mean, Boaz was doing the very thing in which he was able to filter through all these other ladies and be able to find the ruby, the gem that was hidden in the rough, which was Ruth. And being able to look past all of the shortcomings and everything that which was against her, and realize that this woman was calling on to his heart, that God was guiding him and directing him into this area. And I feel like so many women are trying to get to a place where, how do we do this? So I usually just try to leave a portion of the mess of these episodes where I just, talk a little about the message and whatnot. And so how do we weed out the wrong? So first of all, you got to work on yourself first before you can work on any guy. Look, no guy out there can bring you salvation. That there's a reason why it's a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Verse 3. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself. She's telling Ruth, before you head out to Boaz, make sure you are positioned to do so. Make sure that you are good. Make sure that you're good to go. And I feel like so many women, do you know what? I get it. It's a scary time. It's fearful. But don't be afraid to focus on you. Don't be afraid to literally, like, hey, look, if God is going to bring a guy into your life, don't worry about it. Just don't necessarily, you don't need to jump into these relationships. You don't need to necessarily go head first into it because some guy is giving you attention. Focus on you first. Focus on your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And if it's of God, the guy's not going to go anywhere. That guy's going to stick around. That guy's going to be waiting. So it's important that we get ourselves right with Jesus Christ. You know, if you were in a past relationship where it involved sexual sin, or, you know, if you felt like your relationship with Christ took a nosedive because of it, now's the season, now's the time to get yourself back into a place where you are communion with Christ. The second thing I want to point out is Naomi told Ruth not just to wash or anoint, but they also said, put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor. When I was reading that, I was thinking, put on the best garment. It almost brought that verse that brings to mind, where it says, put on the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe it's in Romans chapter 13, verse 14. It says, put on the Lord Jesus Christ. And the idea of this is that in everything that we should do, we should be putting on Jesus Christ, period. In every single day, in every situation, we should be putting on Jesus Christ. Because I seriously, like, I'm sorry, but I feel like women really, really need to hear this. Look, you do not need to sacrifice your holiness in order for this relationship to work. You do not have to compromise yourself in order for a relationship to come into your life. If you stay truthful to what God is calling you to do, then God is going to lead you and guide you and direct you. And it may, look, he may not be in the church to which you are in, but I do believe that if you put yourself in a position where you're constantly putting God first, seeking him, walking in accordance to his will, it might end you up in a concert where you could meet your future husband. It might involve you going to some kind of conference where he's at. Or, I mean, God could ultimately bring the person in his church. And I mean, though I don't, you know, I always warn women, be careful when they're online dating and whatnot, because I know that's a big factor and whatnot. I know that's a huge thing on how people meet and everything. But even though I don't, you know, there's a possibility you could meet your future husband or wife via online. It's, once again, it's all being about being guided by God and making sure that Christ is in the center of it. And that has to come first. Like, look, if this guy or this individual is trying to force a relationship on you, do not be afraid to simply say, bye, boy, I'm done, right? Just toss it aside. Because look, if it's not of God, you don't want it. It's just going to make things so much more worse.
Yeah.
And lastly, this last point, I would just want to bring it home with, and this is what I think Naomi gives Ruth some of the best advice here after this. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. Depending on what kind of version you read here, I'm reading out of the New King James. I think there's other versions where Naomi's telling her to observe. In this version, Naomi's telling her, you know, notice where he's lying down, take notice of it, right? I think that's something that so many women are doing in the church today. They're not noticing. They're not observing.
Yeah.
They're leading and guiding things with their hearts. They're taking step forwards in getting to know guys with their hearts and not necessarily noticing. I couldn't tell you how many times I decided to sit back and notice some women, and I'm thank God to this day that I never got into a relationship with some of these women, because it would have been a nightmare. It would have been absolutely awful. I mean, like I said, most guys are going to treat this like an interview. They're going to give you a fake version of yourself. When I was speaking with my wife, I had to throw trick questions at her. I needed her to tell me what I wanted to hear without me asking her, because I needed to know what came from her heart, and it was something that was in her heart, not necessarily something that I wanted her to say. And she felt it was what I wanted her to say. It's something, you know, there's so much where we're just not observing. I think we just, you know, don't be afraid to look, you've already been single for a little while. Take a little extra more time to make sure that this person is of God. And above all else, don't panic.
Yeah.
Be patient. I do believe that if you walk in accordance to God's will for your life, God is ultimately going to bless you with someone. in which he has called you to. Now, the journey is always going to be different. Don't compare it to anyone else. Your love story is going to be different, and it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be blessed. But you just got to be patient and allow God to move. And the interesting part that I love about this book is that if you look at some of the meanings here, Ruth actually means in Hebrew friend or companion. And if you look at the meaning of Moab, or to be a Moabite, it means the word in Hebrew means from the father. And if you take Boaz, his meaning means in strength. So if you literally put all of these things together, it's almost as if God is forming a sentence in a message for everyone who's reading the book of Ruth, who's dealing with the singleness right now, saying, you have strength to wait for that companion who is going to be sent to you by the Father. So, I mean, take that time to understand and realize your situation may look bleak. It's tough, it's hard, and I understand and I get it. But don't compromise yourself. Don't compromise your faith, and don't compromise the will of God for your life. And I trust and believe that God is going to do great things in your life and going to guide you to that special someone in your life.
Amen.
But that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank everyone for this joining me on this episode. God bless you all for listening. Until next time, take care.